Okay, let's do some Mathity-Math. It says here, simplify the rational expression and then identify the value or values that x cannot be. All right, let's just do this one step at a time and tackle the first part. It says simplify the rational expression. Okay, all that's asking us to do is factor out the greatest common factors and then see if they can divide out by dividing by themselves to become 1 and then multiplying by 1 doesn't change anything, so they essentially go away. I'll explain that more in a second. So let's just start at the numerator. Okay, so when we try to simplify these rational expressions, we're going to go to the numerator and we're going to first look at the coefficients. That's the number in front of the variable. So here we have the coefficient of 2, 8, and 16. We're going to go to the lowest coefficient because this one will be the most limiting one. And this is a great coefficient to work with because if you look at the factors of 2, there's only really 2 factors. 1 times 2. And actually, we never use 1, so really there's only one factor for us to try, and that is just 2. So essentially, we're going to try and divide 2 out of the coefficients. So if we do that, first we test the other coefficients. Is 8 divisible by 2? Yeah, that works. And is 16 divisible by 2? Yep, that works. So we can use 2 as our coefficient. So I'll just write that here. Next, we want to check those variables. So when we look at these variables, again, you go to the smallest one because that'll be the most limiting. So here we're going to use x to the second power because when we divide these out, we actually just kind of subtract down the number of degree. So can you take a 2 from a 3? Yeah, it'd be 1. Can you take a 2 from a 5? Yeah, it'd be 3. So we go to the smallest one, so we're going to use x squared, and that's what we're going to factor out. Let's see what that looks like. So doing the coefficients, well, what is 2 divided by 2? That's 1, and you don't have to write that, but it's okay. And then what is x to the 5th divided by x to the 2nd? Well, that gives you x to the 3rd because we just subtract out those exponents, okay? Moving down the line, 8 divided by 2, that is 4. And x cubed divided by x squared, well, we just track down. That just leaves us with x, okay? And you could also put x to the first power. That's fine, but I'll just leave the x. And then last we go over here. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And we have x squared and x squared, so nothing is left, so just 8. And that's the first step for our numerator. Now we can tackle the denominator. Now, again, we got lucky. They gave us the smallest coefficient of 2, so we already know we're going to try 2. Well, does 48 divide by 2? It sure does, so we're going to use that. And then we can see here that our lowest degree is 1, so that's what we're going to use. It's the same process. Okay. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Again, you don't have to write it, but I will. Okay? And then we have x squared, and then we're dividing out just an x, so we subtract that down, so we get left with just x. And then 48 divided by 2 is 24, and there's just an x and an x, so that's that. Now, throughout this process, if you're not sure you're on the right track, you can stop and redistribute back in what you took out, and you should get right back where you started. It's a good way just to make sure your first step was the right step. So quickly, 2x squared times x to the 3rd, well, that is 2x to the 5th. Check. 2x squared times 4x is 8x to the 3rd. Check. And 2x squared times 8 is 16x squared. So I know my numerator, I'm on the right track. Same thing, try with the denominator. 2x times 1x is 2x squared, and 2x times 24 is 48x. So my work checks out, and we're in business. The next stage is to look at what's outside your parentheses, look at what you factored out, and see what can divide away. Now, a common mistake here is to go, wow, they're the same, and cross them out. But that would be a mistake because they're not actually the same because this is x squared and this is just x. So I do want to take a second, and I'm just going to kind of focus on the part outside the parentheses here so you can see what it looks like. I'm not going to rewrite the whole problem. I'm just going to kind of take a side thought over here. If you look at 2x squared, that's the same as saying 2 times x times x. And let me move this down a little bit so we can see what's going on. Okay, so 2x squared is the same as saying 2 times x times x. And you can see 2x is the same as saying 2 times x. So if these were to divide out, well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, which is the same as 1 over 1. And when you multiply by 1, it doesn't really change anything, so that would go away. Same thing for x divided by x, because anything divided by itself is 1. And you're left with just x in the numerator. So when you rewrite this whole thing, it's going to look like this. X times x to the third plus 4x plus 8. And down here, we're just going to have x plus 24. And if you want to go back up here and see what that looks like, it's because one of these x cancels, leaving you with just x. So just x is left to get rid of that squared. And those two cancel, okay? So that's what we have here. So this right here, actually you could probably stop right here depending on what's being asked of you. You may be asked to redistribute in whatever's left over, and if you are asked to redistribute in whatever's left over, you could take a second and rewrite this. It would just be, you multiply x by every term up here. So you would get x to the fourth plus 4x squared plus 8x over x plus 24. And either one of these are valid simplified expressions. It really just depends what you're being asked, okay? So both of these would be accepted. And then the next step, it did say, if you go back up, it said identify the value or values that x cannot be. So identify the value or values that x cannot be. And so this kind of goes back to a little bit of a conceptual understanding, and we'll work right here. See, there's a math rule that says you can never ever divide by 0, okay? And so dividing by 0 is a no-no. So if we substituted in values here for x, every value we put in would be a good value, except if there were a value that made the denominator equal 0, because then you're breaking the rule. You're not allowed to divide by 0. Now, looking at this, it's pretty straightforward. You can say, oh, I get it. That's just negative 24, because negative 24 plus 24 is 0. And you would be correct. But I would encourage you to take a moment and make sure you understand the process that you can always use to get there. And the process you can always use to get there is take this denominator, right, and set it equal to 0. And if you set that denominator equal to 0, if you just do basic algebra here, subtract 24 from both sides, you would see that x is 24. So when x is 24, the total is 0, and now we know that, when x is negative 24, we know that the total is 0, so we know we're never allowed to use negative 24 in this situation because it makes us divide by 0. So you can just write x cannot be equal, that means like not equal, that's not equal, negative 24. And voila, there is your answer. And I guess we should square off one of these, or maybe this one too if you want. Okay, so there you go. Those are your answers. As always, if you want more math practice, please subscribe. I make new practice problems every day. And if there's something you want to see, a problem you need help with, just leave a comment below and I'll do my best to make it for you. Bye!